Hi everybody, and welcome to this I forgot the month. It's the March episode of FTL, and welcome. For those of you that haven't joined us before, my name is Hannah Monroe. I'm head of transformation here at ITAS, and today we're going to talk all about doing more with less. So how do we maximize efficiency? Now, I've got a funny feeling this might end up being one of my super packed full session. So I have tried to refer to existing materials wherever possible, just so we can get through everything that we need to do as we go through. So bear with me. It's going to be a packed presentation. But as you're listening to this, if there are areas that you would like to see more of, perhaps there's something you want me to actually get into more detail about, then shout it out, please, because it would be great to do some follow-up sessions on these FTLs focused on particular areas. So, and that is a bit of my secret and very cunning plan if you're a Blackadder fan. So let's get started. If you are watching this live, by the way, well, firstly, thank you for joining us. Please say hello in the chat. It's great to know that we've got a number of people watching this live, and always great to get live questions and feedback. It's always incredibly useful. So I'll keep an eye on the chat, but apologies. I'll just try and find a good spot to catch up with any questions. So for those of you that don't know me, super quick introduction. My name is Hannah Monroe, and as I said, I'm transformation lead here at ITAS. So I spent the last sort of 10 to 15 years implementing different pieces of software, but all focused around finance. So I literally have lived and breathed finance, and I've been really lucky because as a consultant, you get to go into you get to do so many projects a year. So I've worked across multiple industries and had the opportunity to work across multiple products as well. So, and that's what I kind of want to talk to you about in these sessions is we're really going to focus on what are some practical tips, not always software related. There's a little bit of software in there, a little bit of technology, but fundamentally, what are the things that I see in customers? What are some of the great things I've seen customers do to drive improvements in efficiency? And what are some of the areas where I think, we could be better? So this is really genuinely is a mix of things that I've seen other people do and I've worked with them on delivering, but also improvements that we've led and driven ourselves as a transformation consultancy. So today's session is all about doing more with less. And when we talk about doing more with less, it means how can we get more out of our team in terms of productivity? How can we make our existing processes more efficient so we can do more of them? And how can we get more out of the systems that we already got? Because sometimes, if you're in a challenging economic environment, you don't always have the budget to look at new systems, right? So how can you do more with what you've already got in? And that's kind of the theme for today's session, is very much about how can we do more with what we've got. And then hopefully over the next few months, we'll do more about how can we get the right systems in place to drive true transformation. And it's a really genuinely exciting area at the moment in terms of new technology coming through. So key things. So we talked about the three areas. So we talked about team, processes, and systems. The first one we're going to look at is team efficiency. So some key things to think about. So here's the top level. We're going to look at how, reviewing things like the amount of meetings, how your team can use time blocking or chunking to be more productive with the volume that they've got. Looking at things like time and motion assessments to really get into where time is spent and how you can improve it. Skill assessments and how you can improve their focus within their day job, right? So not all of this is finance specific, but it's some great tools that I've seen in play to help do that. So one of the things I think is really interesting, and I've done this exercise with my team, is actually reviewing the meetings that you have on a regular basis, right? And even the ad hoc ones. So actually deciding what should be a meeting versus what should just be an update or shared and collaborated on, and making sure that you're ensuring there is enough time for people to actually attend, to actually do the day job. So we've implemented a few things like no meeting days or no meeting mornings so that people have time to focus. I've also been looking at ways we can cut the length of our meetings so that you can get more, obviously squeeze more meetings in, as to say, but you can cover the same content in a shorter space of time. Looking at things like how you can deliver updates and shared collaboration. So we have internal reporting that gets sent out, but it's not delivered in meetings. People don't have to sit there and consume it. It's just given, and people download and read it at a time that suits them in and amongst their other work. So looking at collaboration tools for reports, dashboards so people can access information on demand, but also how you can allow people to get access to shared information as and when they need it. Because some people need sort of up to the moment data, others need it on an ad hoc basis. So thinking about that as well. And really thinking about, when you're having those regular meetings in finance, not just thinking about who really needs to be involved, but also what is the topic. And if you haven't got an agenda, cancelling the meeting and moving on. So that's super important as well. And I think certainly as we've done more with teams, it's really easy for us as individuals to just accept and squeeze meetings in for 50, and it's amazing the difference like a half an hour here, half an hour there can have on productivity. So first thing I would just say to you, if you're looking at team productivity, start with your meetings and cut out the unnecessary. The second things to think about is time blocking or chunking, right? So, it takes brain power, but also time to fully shift from task to task. And one thing I see in a lot of finance teams is that people are like switching between different tasks. So they'll process a purchase invoice and then they'll swap over and do something else. So just really thinking about how your team are structuring their day, how, making sure that they're taking the time away from emails to actually get the data entry done, and to use to schedule things in the right times, because there's certain optimum times for things like credit control. You're unlikely to get hold of people, or you're less likely to get hold of people over the lunch break potentially. So actually focusing the credit control efforts between, either, standard hours, so 9 till 11, or sometimes you might find that for the industry you work in, actually there's a lot of them that come in at 8:30 and do an early piece, so you might have better luck there. So really thinking about how your team are structuring the day and minimize the shifting, because that shifting is not just the time it takes to obviously close that window and open another one. It's the mental shift, because then you don't get into the flow of work, and that's super important. So that's something to consider in terms of how your team are structuring their day and improving efficiency without any major change or any major budget change, I should say. The other thing you can do, and this is, so I have some clients that are very, there are some real obvious changes that we can make, right? And that's super interesting, great for us because we can have a really big impact. But there are some that are working naturally quite efficiently, but they haven't understood where time is being wasted. And that's where things like time and motion assessments come in. So I've seen two types of time and motion assessments. So the first one is very much like for each individual, they put in how much time they spend on different areas. So think of it more like a timesheet. So that's the first example that I've just put up there. So across the top, I would have like credit control, bank rec, invoicing, etc., all the different sort of day-to-day activities. And then what I would do is for each day, I would just say, right, this is how much time I spent on those activities, and just get a general idea of where my team are spending their time. And the great thing about that is obviously it's a lot quicker to do than some of the other methods that we use. But I guess the caveat to that is you just need to be aware that it's a person's interpretation and how they've documented what they're doing versus someone actually being assessed with their timings. And that's where things like time and motion assessments in. Now, these are great, but they are time consuming in themselves and take resource to do. So if you're absolutely swamped, this is perhaps not the ideal methodology to go down, but it does work really well where you have a fairly efficient process, but you need to get more into the detail. So what you would typically do is literally take every step of a process. So if we take invoicing, for instance, opening a purchase invoice, opening the inbox, reading the email, filing it, maybe you're saving down the PDF to a location for people to process, etc. So you literally map out every single step, and you do it for say, a selection of 10 invoices that you receive or 10 emails that you receive. And what's really interesting is you follow the person's steps, and then you follow the steps of the actual document itself. And what it quickly identifies is not just the time it takes that first person to process through, but also on the other side as well. Because again, thinking about not just processing time, but static time. So how long is a purchase invoice sitting in approval, for instance, and what's the elapsed time as well as the doing time. So I love doing, I think this is a really interesting piece, but it does require somebody to shadow and record with a stopwatch to do this really well. Yeah, because otherwise you can end up, again, like with the first model, making assumptions about how long something takes. So great to do in small batches. I would recommend you do it for every single hour of the day for somebody, but taking a particular task and really getting into the detail about how much time it takes to do this and what's the genuine ROI is a great piece to do. And very often you can see things in this process that you won't get from just doing traditional process mapping. Because you're actually following the end-to-end process, you get a much better visibility and understanding of what's actually going on. And I might, if anyone's interested, then please do shout out, or if you're watching this on demand afterwards, send me a message and we'll have a look at doing a more in-depth overview of time and motion and how you can assess time spent on different areas. Another area to improve productivity within your day-to-day finance team is just thinking about, I really enjoy the Pomodoro technique. So once you've cleared your diary of meetings, this is a great way to really focus and get pace and movement within your day. So the key focus is to turn off distractions. So turning off things like Teams alerts, email, shutting down Outlook, and doing 25-minute stints of really focused activity. So I find it works really well when I've got some hard thinking time to do. Because again, if you're in your emails, if you're in your Teams, then it's really easy to get distracted. And then you can stack your day with those 25-minute blocks, 5 minutes in between, and then before you take a long break. So again, it's one of those techniques that I've used when I've had a free meeting day and I want to get loads done. But yes, that's something. The one tip I would say is make sure that when you take your breaks, step away from your machine. Especially depending on the type. So if you're in face-to-face, or meetings, whether that's in person or online, go and do something that's really contrasting to give your brain that chance to relax and refresh itself. So you've heard the saying, a change is as good as a rest, and that's definitely true with that technique. And skill assessment. So I don't think we do enough of this in finance, is actually going through and understanding and assessing our team's skills, because you could have a really incredibly efficient process, but if the person doing that process hasn't got the right skills and competencies, then you're always on the back foot. So one of the things I do reckon, if you're looking to genuinely improve productivity, is understanding, what are the key competencies within the roles of each individual, thinking through both soft and technical skills. So what does that look like? And I really like the self-assessment versus manager assessment model, where given that list of competencies and skills, you both independently put together your assessment of where you think that person's at. So the person will do it for themselves, and then as a manager, you'll do it without looking at each other, and then you bring it together and understand where that perception gap is. And that's always really interesting to talk through those gaps and making sure that you've both understood the competency required and the piece there. And then just making sure that you are investing in training and development. And training and development doesn't have to mean going on a formal course, right? It could just mean time away from the day job to learn or skill. It could be mentoring or coaching somebody else. So, there are ways to do that without having to get individuals in. Just the time to go away and watch a video on a solution, or For instance, we run webinars each month for our customers on the different products, so 200 Intact, etc. And they're free of charge, but it does take time. So balancing out the need for doing the day job, but also building the skill set so they can do it better and faster. Okay, so we've talked a lot about people, and I mentioned there's the 3 pillars, so people, process, and systems. So let's talk about how you can improve process efficiency improvements. And I guess it is aligned to some of the things we've already talked about, like the time and motion piece would, of course, have an impact on your processes and help you find ways to improve it. But there's some key exercises. Now, I've done a lot around process over the last 12 months. So the one thing I'm not going to do is hash over old ground in these process efficiency improvement section. But what I will do is refer you to the previous sessions we've done that that I think you should look at. So the first thing is about making sure that you're gathering independent feedback from your team. So what do I mean by independent? So a lot of the time, when you bring people into a room to give feedback on something, there is a real danger of groupthink. Yeah, so everyone, because as humans, we are designed to align with other people. So the idea behind this is if you're going to get feedback on what's working well, what needs to improve on processes, do it without everyone having a chance to talk it through first, talk it through afterwards. So sending out surveys, sending out like an online form, you can do them, you don't have to pay to do them. You can do them through Microsoft now. They've got Microsoft Forms. You can do them through various, SurveyMonkey, various free options, and get independent feedback on what's working well, what's not, what do you spend most of your time doing, where are there high volumes or complexity or time-consuming areas that we need to focus, and what do they think you can automate? Because your team are doing this day in, day out. So what is it that they think could be automated? Now, they might not have the answer, but they should know the areas to focus on. So that's the first thing, is and making sure you're doing it in a way that's rather than just bringing everyone into a room. If you're going to do that, make sure you get the ideas down and people to submit ideas and thoughts and then discuss, because otherwise everyone just tries to align with what everyone else is thinking. It can be quite dangerous in brainstorming, particularly if you've got strong characters within your team and a mix of like quiet and strong, because you need the feedback from every individual. Document your processes. So and we'll talk about this in the next session as well, but one of the key things that you need to make sure that you have down and on paper is your processes and procedures, right? And I'm talking about, at the moment, I'm just, if you're going to improve processes, you need to have your as is. What does the current way of working look like? Because then you can dig into where are the variants, where are the volumes, where's the time spent in each area of that process. So I did an entire transformation live on how to map out your processes. So if you haven't watched that, I would genuinely recommend you do. We talk about how you actually go through the process, key hints and tips, and that's definitely something that you can go and take away. Excel audits. So this is one of my favorite tools, and it is just amazing how much time people spend in Excel that they don't realize. So making sure that you're running through an Excel audit and assessing your use of Excel. Are the things we're spending time on Excel the right things? And are the things that we could be doing in the system, perhaps? And again, this is really good. So I've seen things like fixed asset registers sitting in Excel when they have an entire fixed asset capability within their system. So this is my starting point when I'm going in and assessing how to improve productivity within a team. Month-end timeline. So this is really, really useful for understanding the flow of work as well as the time taken, because you can use this as a basis to understand what kind of blocks different things. So if you've got a section that doesn't take that long, but is spread over maybe 3 or 4 weeks or 3 or 4 days, because you're getting delays, then you can work on the consistency of delivery, not just the time it takes to do the job. Because that very often with month end, you're waiting on other people to deliver. So sometimes changing the order in which you do things, or putting, having conversations with the rest of the organization to explain the impact can have can make a real change to the productivity within the team. Just because, if we go back to where we started, things like you can chunk your days at month end so that it's really clear when things are delivered. So just sometimes reordering as well as condensing those times or bringing stuff forwards or backwards can have a big impact on not just the time it takes, but the stress levels at month end, which is always a challenge. And I love this. So this is a little one I snipped ages ago, which is about how long you work on making a particular item, and if you save that time, what that does over years. So basically, if something takes a second, how much, and you put in, I do this task yearly, how long, how much time will you shave off? So this is a really great one for prioritizing certain tasks, because if you do something that's really time consuming, but you only do it once a year, versus shaving a couple of minutes off something that you do 50 a day of, can dramatically have a much bigger difference. So thinking about looking at the combination of how often you do something plus how much time you can save can help you prioritize. So thinking, again, just looking at the small things can have a really big impact on the overarching profitability over the next couple of months as well. And again, once you free up capacity, you can use that to drive more change. We talked about the snowball, but this is how you justify the snowball. So this is how you figure out where to start. And these are the things. So we want these, if you're doing 5 a day of something and you can save like 5 seconds, over a year, over 5 years, you could save 12 hours. So just thinking about what that looks like and using it to prioritize what you're doing as well. So we talked about team, we've talked about processes, and we've talked about, or we're about to talk about systems. Okay, so actually going through and driving efficiency in systems. So this is very much about how you get more out of what you've already got, right? And there's probably a whole host of things we need to look at in terms of how you assess what you need and what you change and how to decide whether it's the right thing to change. But there are some really easy things that you can do right now to actually drive system efficiency improvements. So things like actually watching demos of the software that you are planning, that you're currently using, because very often we get so wrapped up in how we use it, we don't think about how the system is designed to work. So that's something to consider in terms of, can you go and look and see why people buy my solution in the first place? What do the people selling it recommend or suggest in terms of how it can help businesses? Because you may not even be aware of some of its capabilities and features. So watching online demos of your software is a really great way to build knowledge and capability. Certainly, with a lot of the platforms we work with, there are masses of, there's so much help in online help menus and how-to guides that we produce, right? So thinking about your core processes. So when you see processes that are particularly inefficient, or once you've done your assessment of where are we spending a lot of time, actually going in and working through knowledge base. We talked about training, and like I said, training doesn't have to be going on a course. It can literally just be spending half an hour to an hour a week learning more about your current systems and what all of those fields do, what all the buttons do, so that you can use them more effectively and efficiently. One thing I notice when I speak to a lot of customers is they do not read recent release notes for upgrades and new features, which I think is a massive mistake, because that's the areas where most people don't stay current with their software. And the reality is that those new releases will have new capabilities that you can apply into your day jobs, right? So if you do nothing else, then just go back and look at the last few release notes that have come out with your system. Things like have, maybe they've added a new feature or functionality that you can apply, or a new way of working in terms of maybe they've added some approvals or something in that can help you. Yeah, so I think making sure you're current with your recent release notes. You should obviously, hopefully, have an account manager that you can speak to about this, but just as a sort of a self-driven step, making sure you're going back through these release notes and figuring out what you can take advantage of. And then another thing I see a lot is people don't know what reports they have available. So just take away from time learning about your reporting tools. But a lot of people haven't even looked at all of the different variations of reports. So what they're doing is they're just going back to a TB, pulling that out, and then using that to build their reports off. And they might even have, very often, standard reports that sit within the system. So that's something to be aware of, and making sure that you've actually had a look through the core reports, because even if they're not perfect, they might be a lot closer to the reports that you're trying to pull out, and finding ways to pre-filter data so it's easier to get data out without you having to do a lot of manual work on the other side. System audits. Now, I did say that majority of these things that we're talking about today don't cost. And obviously, normally a system audit, there would be a charge, but it's a great way to get some advice and guidance on where you as personalized to you as to where you as an organization can improve. So getting somebody that knows the software really well to come in and do an assessment and audit and make recommendations. Now, and certainly the way that we approach it is that we would normally kind of split it up into these are the recommendations. These are, high, medium, low priority. And as you go through, normally there's a few little things you can just tell people about that just gets them thinking and doing things. So we do quite a few of those, particularly with Sage software, around, how people can get more out of their Sage 200, Sage 50, or Sage Intact environment. The other thing as well is very often it's finding other organizations that are similar to yours. Now that could be similar industry, similar size, similar complexity, and actually asking, particularly if you've got new people into the team, how they've seen things work well in other organizations, right? Because very often, if you've got a new team that have maybe come from different places, they will have seen things work better, and digging into that. And really understanding, organizations and peers, and where your colleague, if we think about networking, so there's some great networking groups out there, getting information and insight from them. So for anybody listening that is obviously on Sage, of course, we have a whole load of material that you can get access to. So I've included all of these in the notes today. So things like Sage 50 Help Guide, Sage 200, and Sage Intact. Obviously, we've got some year-end guides. So for those of you that are in the throes of that right now and watching this on demand, please do make sure that you go in and check those out. And that's a great one to have. So we've also got demonstrations of the core Sage products that you can get access to. So Sage 50, Sage 200, Sage Intact, those are available for you to access on demand and free of charge in your own time. Around the different Sage platforms. If you're using Sage, please, and you want some resources to have a look at, then definitely look at those. And then some common quick wins that I see. So it's really interesting that the vast majority of audits that we do, there's a lot of common themes. So I'm just going to run these through just to give you guys some hints, tips, and things to think about. So the first thing is bank recs. I've not seen people using either the bank feeds, maybe they don't have those, or they're still doing either manual imports or literally I had somebody that was highlighting and doing paper. So if you're at that stage, get your bank feed sorted. And there's two aspects to bank feeds. One is that it automates the input of your bank rec, but very often you can build match rules and automations off the back of it to automate the matching of your bank rec. Okay, so bank feeds for me have two aspects. One is just getting it in faster, and you can create transactions off the back of it rather than manually entering on the system and then matching them. And the second thing is you can automate the matching based on logic and criteria that you give the system. So that's one thing. The second thing I see a lot of is payment runs. So I see a lot of people that are still manually generating a payment run and then going into their bank and typing in the sort codes, the account numbers, the amounts, etc. Pretty much all of the software has inbuilt capabilities to generate BACS files for upload, right? So at the very least, just turn that capability on. You can also look at things like if you collect a lot of stuff by credit cards, adding credit card links to invoices, that can often be a way to, and that will normally automatically create the payment ready for you to match. Purchase ordering. So, a lot of people are still doing purchase ordering through Excel. If they get it, and then and then there's all this kerfuffle when they go to month end because they've got to chase up, has this been paid, can I pay this, etc., and is this matching a purchase order? So getting purchase orders, and pretty much all of the core systems will have some kind of purchase order capability. It might not do all of everything that you want in terms of authorizations and approvals. You might need to look at some additional modules, but just getting purchase orders recorded in the system is a really great starting point and is normally available within most systems to do as core. Setting up items. This might be a bit of a weird one, but very often people will manually enter data that should be there as standard. So when you enter an invoice, the idea behind items is rather than code, rather than having to choose the nominal, type in the description, if you set up items, you can default a lot of that. So you just amend the things that you need to. It can also help massively with reporting as well. So that's well worth looking at. And a lot of people don't use it. They're still using a lot of free text, which is a challenge for automation. Reporting. We talked about looking at existing reports, but very often people do not understand what kind of capabilities they have within their system. So in terms of reporting tools, and so that's a big piece to have a look at. So getting to know what tools you have available and doing some training on those tools is a really good shout, right? Because you're probably, if you don't know how to use them, you're probably spending a lot of time in Excel working off TBs to be able to produce management reports. Customizing invoice layouts. So I've seen a number of instances where people have about 20 layouts that they manually select so that they can send out an invoice. So looking at how you can bulk invoice and have more automation around formatting and layouts, etc., is normally a really good shout. I've seen, like defaulting email templates, so things just go directly to customer without your team having to get involved, can save a huge amount of time, especially for those high volume environments. Credit control tracking. So very often that's being done in a spreadsheet and then it's put in another spreadsheet for reporting, and everyone's fighting over that said spreadsheet. So getting that into your system. So obviously in 50 using the communications tab, in 200 using queries, and in Intact using Chatter or Credit Hound or something of those, something of that ilk, will help you improve and make things a lot faster. Approvals. I genuinely feel like people underestimate the amount of time approvals take when they're done manually. So I've seen people literally enter an invoice, attach the invoice, then have to go manually into an email, send an invoice, request it, then chase it because nobody's come back, and then they go back in and it's not there. So there's a lot of chasing that comes with approvals and expenses. So those are two of the areas that I would really focus on in terms of improvements as well. Awesome. Okay, so hopefully a lovely set of quick wins and things that you can look at. And in most instances, not all, but in the majority of those instances, those should be in your current software and should be available for you to access. So do think about prioritization as well. So we've talked a lot about identifying improvements, but thinking through like having a plan for your systems. Not just, we talked about having training plans for our team, but making sure you've got a systems plan. Like, what does the short, medium, and long-term view of your system look like? What are the areas that you need to focus on? And just making sure you're chipping away at it over a period of time. Like this is a journey. It's not a destination. We should be constantly evaluating and reevaluating whether we need to adjust or invest in our systems. And with that, so one of the things that you've got to think about is like at some point, if you're seeing problems across the boards with the system, then you do need to take a step back. And because I very much doubt that anybody's using any system that badly that you've got red flags all over the place. It is likely, not always, but it's likely if you're having area issues in every single area, either you have a major training problem, as in they don't understand how to use your system, or it might just be that you've outgrown or not got quite the right system for you. So thinking through sort of giving your system a traffic light assessment on the different areas, i.e. credit control, invoicing, rev rec, bank rec. And if you're seeing lots of reds across the board with those changes, then that's kind of an indicator that you really need to sort of assess the wider system, not just one area. If all you've got is like a red against credit control and bank rec, then it's worth just investing the effort in your current systems to get that working well. You probably just need an integration or just some training on the system. If across the board you're getting lots of issues, then that's when I would say that's the point at which you step back and go, do I need to evaluate my wider systems, and what does that look like? Awesome. Okay. I can't believe I've literally hammered through that. So really, really happy that we got to the end of that. I was worried that this is going to be an overrun because I have a really bad habit of doing that. So the next session we're doing is actually one I'm quite excited. It's about talking about the new normal in finance, because we've been through a massive transition over the last 3 years in terms of COVID, the shift to remote working. I think finance and people's opinion of finance and finance roles is changing as well at the moment. So I want to do a session on how do we future-proof our finance team? What does the new normal look like, short-term and long-term? And I'm working through that in terms of ideas and things that you need to think about now, so that in 6 to 12 months you are ready to take advantage of the new normal. And some great feedback. Thanks, Tim. Glad you found that list of quick wins. And again, if anyone wants the PowerPoint stuff, happy to circulate this. Some sort of, especially if you're starting a new role, there's some really easily changes that can have a dramatic impact on the team. But if there's anything in this particular session that you would like me to dig in deeper to, I am more than happy to do sort of some follow-up sessions. This was kind of a very much a top level overview around improving efficiency. I'm really excited to talk about the new normal in finance next time, which is going to be about how do we create a finance team or an environment for finance team members that allows them to thrive and take advantage of what finance is becoming and will be in the next few months. So to those that are joining me live, thank you so much. It's been great to have you with us. There's some links on there to some existing content if you haven't seen it. The oldies but goodies, as I like to call them, on things like reducing your month-end close time, getting rid of Excel spreadsheets, and rethinking your finance processes. Again, great education. We talked about education. This is all free for your team to access. Get them thinking about helping you drive this transformation and not just sitting with yourselves to do. So all of those are available on demand on YouTube and on our website as well. So they can be accessed. And yeah, of course, if you have other questions, thoughts, ideas, things you would like me to cover, then please do reach out. I'm always open to feedback and input from my listeners. It's great to have a number of people live as well. So thank you everyone for listening. I'll stay on for a few seconds to if anyone has any questions after today's session. But great to have you with us, and of course look forward to seeing you next time on the FTL.